Morning, everyone. So I'm Jacob Tomaw. A little bit about me to start off with. I am an 8-year veteran of a little DevOps team in my home with my wife. We've grown up to a 5-person team. We use Scrum at home and DevOps to build our family. And we also have a continuous delivery of children. We're expecting our 4th in January. Now what I do to support all of that is I help people take vacations. I work at Orbitz, and I'm a principal engineer there. People ask me a lot if that means I'm in charge of discipline. That's not true. The vice principal of engineer is in charge of discipline. But in a way, I am in charge of discipline. A lot of what I do is help develop well-disciplined engineering practices, try to eliminate a lot of the things that we heard complained about in the last session around engineers, and to make sure that we are seeking feedback from operations and working together so that we're not hiding costs from anyone. Part of that is somehow this year I ended up being the continuous delivery advocate for Orbitz. I really don't know how that happened. I think I just decided I wanted to do that, and I kind of get to do what I want to do as long as it's effective at Orbitz. You can follow me on Twitter, or you can go to my horribly outdated personal webpage if you'd like. It's really outdated, but you know, I have a webpage. Okay, so a little bit about Orbitz. It helps to understand where we're going here. Orbitz was founded in the year 2000. It's built right here in Chicago, just a couple blocks that way across the river. Right now, we're about 180 plus applications all come together to form our couple dozen different websites and brands. That's about 5,000 VMs that we're running in a couple different production environments. And that's all composed of about 35-ish teams. Most of those in Chicago, but we have people all over the world. And while each team is not, say, a completely autonomous unit, they do work fairly independently, and for the most part, they work on their own applications. So even though we're a large company, there's definitely a lot to learn here for small companies. And it's a great place to work. And if you'd like to, my boss is sitting right over there. We're hiring, and Will Smith, in fact, our HR guy, is over in the other booth. We'd love to talk to you if you'd like to come talk to us. And after this talk, you're going to want to come talk to us. All right, so deployment history. This is what all the ex-Orbitz employees have been wanting to see. This is the one slide. It's at the very beginning, and then I'm not talking about this anymore. So in the year 2000, we were one app, and it was basically deployed on demand. And by mid-2001, we were still one app, but we had taken back to weekly deployments of that one application. By spring of 2002, we had 2 apps we were still deploying weekly, and by the end of 2002, we had basically our full product offering, and we were delivering bi-weekly. Just a little before I started, we had much more complicated. We had 2 more brands. We had another brand. We were looking to add more brands onto our platform, and we were technically delivering bi-weekly, but we were missing that bi-weekly a lot. And by the time I started, releases had nearly completely halted. We had dated releases. Our release would have names like January 5th, 2007, and that would often be delivered in February after the time of the next release. So things were really going to halt as our infrastructure and platform got more complicated. We were going to do a massive refactoring that we call Global Platform, and part of the principles for that was to be able to deliver more continuously. And we kind of met that we had many more applications that were each delivered independently, and by 2010 we were trying to do weekly, but we weren't quite winning at that, so we took a step back in 2011 to bi-weekly, and we got into a very good cadence, and we have stayed at that cadence for 3 long years, where everything's under control. Most of our applications are deployed independently every 2 weeks in a defined window. But as the DevOps philosopher Mario Andretti says, if everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough. So we wanted to go faster. And why did we want to go faster? Well, there's lots of reasons that we want to go faster, but we know that you learn from failure. And we want to fail often and fast if we're going to fail at all. So when everything is under control, we know that we're not taking enough risks. We're not doing the things we need to do that our business needs us to do in order to win in our market. So we want to take measured risk, and we also, if we're not taking enough risk, technically, then we're allowing ourselves to do things that aren't right. We're willing to tolerate misconfigurations because we're going slowly. We're able to tolerate bad code because we're going slowly, and those things continue to slow us down. And we can also tolerate really bad process. Things where the process slows us down, since we're already delivering slowly, we can continue to deliver slowly. But over this time, we've transformed into a learning organization where we don't just fail and then commiserate about that. We fail and we learn about why we've had failures. And so all of this leads to that we want to innovate sooner. We want to know what's going to happen sooner. We also do a lot of testing on our website itself, and we want to be able to implement those innovations faster. All right, but it's not always going to be smooth sailing. We are going to encounter obstacles. We really are going to encounter obstacles. There we go. All right. So some of our obstacles are going to lead to us needing to decide, are we going to roll forward over this problem? We've implemented change, we can roll forward. Do we need to roll back? This is bad enough that we need to roll back? Or do we need to stop what we're doing? Hold still, cancel the release, don't move forward into another environment. So here's just some of the obstacles that we've encountered, that you're likely to encounter, that anyone can encounter. So we have multiple products that we're delivering. It's not simple one app, one product. Some of our applications have tens of teams that are contributing code to that could be hundreds of developers. And that leads to a really large change set. If we implement something new in production, something breaks, it's not, that's the commit that was the problem. There's a whole list of commits that we have to look through to figure out what the problem was. And all these different teams that are contributing code, they have different priorities. What they're contributing to might not be the highest priority for that team. And so there's a mixture in that change set of things that are really high priority and things that are lower priority. We also, in the beginning of the year, we had a really lengthy testing process. We dedicated 2 weeks to not even a full regression, a detailed partial regression of our website every 2 weeks. And nothing could be deployed to production without that. There's also compliance issues. If you're a public company, you might have SOX compliance testing that you have to do. We have a large register, taking money application that has to meet certain guidelines. But different industries are going to have different compliance issues. The deployment procedures for applications might not be uniform. They might not be well known. They might only be known to one person. These are all things, challenges of going faster. There's also user acceptance testing, third-party integration, and infrastructure is always evolving. So there are lots of obstacles, and we should expect them and to not know what they all are. So I'm going to go through some of the obstacles we've encountered and how we've tackled those. So the first one is patches. Now, patches can be a little counterintuitive because I'm talking about delivering software more quickly. Patches are delivering software more quickly. But if you think about where we have applications where tens of teams are contributing code with different priority and large change sets, those changes are not additive, they're multiplicative. So they're just adding to the complexity, and this is just going to further make that change complex. So we wanted to reduce the number of patches we had. Not into production. We've gotten pretty good at not having patches into production, but we have a pre-production environment where we were doing this lengthy testing, and we would just patch it left and right without anyone knowing about it. So, what we looked at this is, what can we do? One of the things that we can do in this pre-production environment is recognize that it is a time for us to practice. We can also make it into a team effort, and to do that we had to compare what we were doing in pre-prod and production. So in our pre-production environment, a tester might find an issue, an engineer would fix that issue, and then a new version would be deployed to that application. At most, 2 people would know that this thing had happened, that there had been a bug. With the testers on the 9 other teams would have no idea that anything had changed. In production, we'd have someone find an issue. It might be a tester, it might be our operations, it might be our CEO, and then product would assess the priority of that change. And then an engineer assesses what the level of effort of fixing that is, and then product determines the relative value of that to everything else. Engineer fixes it, and product is the champion for that deployment. It's a team effort that where everyone is learning from this problem. So we wanted to make our pre-production more like our production. Over and over again, this was something that we had heard for years, that we wanted to make our pre-production more like our production. In fact, they were so out of sync that operations infrastructure changes would be implemented first in production and then into our pre-production environment. So we were using production as a test for whether things would work. So we had to think about how can we effectively make a test that will guide us into if something should be patched in our pre-production environment or not, and how would we use that in production. So in production, we were very good at determining whether something should be patched or not, if it was worth the effort. So we developed a rubric, a guide for knowing if we were doing the right thing or not. But there was lots of things we needed to know. We needed to know, and you're likely going to need to know, how long is it going to take to roll this service in? What are the procedures for doing that roll? What's the cost of doing that roll? No change is costless, right? There's some impact that's going to happen. Some human has to do something, even if it's just pushing a button. And there's oftentimes can be variation between when you're rolling back and rolling forward. And then you need to know the certification requirements for your host, for your application. And you need to know who owns this application. Very often it's not the development team who cares about whether this application is working. If there's a product owner, you're selling something, you're doing something of value. At Orbitz, we got a lot of value from these things because we knew a lot of them, because we have existing standards around how we deploy software and the impact it has. So we had a very simple deployment procedures. All of our 108 applications are basically deployed the exact same way. We use the exact same tooling. The same button gets pushed to deploy them. We also got a lot of value out of it. We've had a commitment to ideally zero impact deployments, but very low impact deployments is something that we're sure of. That when we deploy software, we're not affecting customer traffic. And we also know that for the most part, forwards and backwards deployments are the same. It's just the changing of one number. A deployment is a deployment is a deployment. So we developed these rubrics. Can this problem, we found a problem, can this problem remain in this environment? We have a pipeline of environments, pre-prod, a performance testing, a production canary environment, and then a couple production environments. So there's this train of environments. We found a bug. Can it remain here? Because every environment has customers. It might be testers. It might be people who are paying to use the site. It might be product. It could be sales engineers. There's a variety of people. Can they tolerate this bug at this level? If not, if they can it go to the next environment? Is this something that is not worth us fixing right now? If it's not something that can be promoted up, is the solution known? Does the team that needs to fix the problem know how to fix the problem? And finally, we go back. Finally, is fixing the issue worth more than deployment? So we had to know how much it cost to deploy. To do this for our pre-production environment, we knew that there was lots of testing that was going on. There was invalidation of testing. There was some man hours that required doing the actual work. So we set a bar of $4,000 over the course of for each deployment. So any fix that we wanted to put in had to be worth more than $4,000, or it would just have to wait to the next release. All right. So we implemented this for our patches. And the first week that we did this, we had maybe 7 patches that came in asking to be requested. None of them had any business justification. None of them had necessarily solutions assigned to them. They were just, we're going to have to patch. We're going to have to patch right now. Many of them were things as simple as pixel perfection on the site to legitimate problems, things that definitely had to be fixed. The next week, I pushed back on those. I said we have to have a business justification of over $4,000. I pushed back on that. And the next week we had half. And then the weeks after that, we had virtually none. We were able to, business was able to see that we were doing the right thing, that there was going to be a release coming up soon, and that's when the change would go in. We didn't need to save this release at all cost. All right, so another problem we had is persistent production problem. So this might sound familiar. So we roll in a production change. Several hours later, it starts failing. our instincts kick in. We want to do anything we can to save this release. We do not want to roll back. Rollback would be the worst thing in the world. So we try for days to save this. We're restarting applications. We're doing all kinds of testing. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Finally, we relent, and we roll back the release. And the problem continues. So now we have the worst thing I could ever imagine happening at work. We have production-only issues are bad enough, but now we have one that, as far as we know, exists no matter what version of code we're running. Well, what it turns out happened was we have a monitoring agent on each of our VMs, and a change to that agent had been rolled in, but because it was a change to the JVM settings, which don't get picked up until the application gets restarted. So when the application got restarted, we pulled in that change, and when we rolled it back, that change remained. We didn't roll back. So that was, on top of all the development change set, we added an infrastructure change set on top of that. But we wasted days discovering this. We could have gotten this feedback much sooner. Imagine how much wasted effort we put into trying to figure out what did we change in the application, what went wrong, only to discover there was nothing wrong with the application. All right, so eventually we did find the problem, but we really failed at learning at first year. So what did we learn eventually? We learned that we didn't communicate very well. So this change to the JVM settings had been put in by an operations team, and a dev team didn't know about this. We need to communicate better about how we're hurting each other and how we're improving each other's products. We also know that large change sets are bad. That includes adding operation infrastructure changes on top of our development changes. What should have happened here was when the infrastructure change went in, we should have restarted all the applications to pick up that change, so then we're doing one change at a time. We also should have rolled back early. It's in, and what we should have done is use our rubric. So our rubric would have told us, is this thing a problem? Yes. Can it stay here? No, it can't stay like this. So then we asked, do the developers know what's going on? No, we were in active search mode. We had no idea what was going on, how we would fix this problem. So we should have rolled back. If we had used our rubric, we would have succeeded faster. Another issue we had was a late bug. So we've done all our testing. We've drastically cut our regression testing time down. And we find a bug the last day of testing, the last hour of testing. And so this bug comes up in these historically coupled applications. So we have these 180 applications, but 3 of them are really the core of our infrastructure. And for historic purposes, they are always deployed at the same time. So one of these applications, one of the 3, a bug is found. Now it's an important bug. It was booking. We have to be able to book things. So we can't deploy something that will break all booking. But our old habits kick in again. We start pressuring the team who needs to fix this problem to fix it right away. We start hoping that they will fix it. We begin negotiating with our change management that they will please let us hold back test certification a little bit so we can get this into production. And then once we've passed that, we start pleading with them that they'll let us merge 2 releases into one. And then finally we relent where we missed that second release, and we've lost an entire week of releases because we were not doing what we should have been doing. What we should have done was kill this run release. We should have said, we found a bug, great, the next release is not that far away, we'll just kill this release, this one is not important, and move on from there. If we had used our rubric, we would have been able to do this. We also should have known that the architecture of our applications is actually improved. We've had a mandate for 5 years that all of our applications have to be independently deployable. We've just never deployed these 3 independently before. And I assert that we could deploy them independently. We should have rolled back the 1 that was bad and retested the 2 that were good and rolled forward with the release there. It would have been an option. But we need to remember the mindset that we were growing in was that there's always going to be another release. This release is not that important. The next one is not that far away. When we're at 2-week releases, 2 weeks is a long time away. A couple of days is not that far. Almost anything can wait a couple of days. All right. So another issue we've had is with different priorities. So when we were deploying when we started deploying every 2 weeks, we employed a person whose job was release coordinator. This person was the police. If there was a critical bug open, she was going around asking who was going to fix this, when they're going to fix it. If the testing wasn't all done, she was going around asking and making sure all the testing was going done. When we moved to a set dedicated release cadence, she did not want to do this anymore, and we did not want her to do this anymore. So the managers of these teams that participate in the release, they took up that task. But they did not, they were already full with all their management and getting their hair pointy tasks, so they did not want to go around policing every person. So we replaced some of what that person did with some email. But now that we're going even faster, the email was not working. So we decided to just stop doing that. We inverted the accountability. So now we assume every release is going to be going into production. It is good. It is going to be tested, unless someone tells us it's not. So again, we found a critical issue, but the priorities of the different teams led to different response times. And one team did not respond to the problem in time for us to do this, even do an assessment of whether this bug could go forward or not. So we did the right thing. We canceled the release. And the system worked. Our to-do list was very clear. We had nothing to do. All right, so another issue that we've had is in user acceptance testing. So we have this environment, pre-production environment, where we do our normal testing, and we're now putting in changes that are going out to production every day into that change. But we have requirements for user acceptance testing that sometimes with our partners or with even internal business that requires a lengthy user acceptance testing that would invalidate that keeping something on that was not going to be on in production, could invalidate the testing that we're doing for our normal releases. So this has been a challenge that we haven't actually solved yet. And so we have asymmetric testing requirements, and we have testing environments that have very limited scope. We don't have a dedicated user acceptance testing environment. And historically, the procedures for creating a new environment have been very costly. But we've been codifying our infrastructure, and we are building an internal cloud that is going to allow us to use our simplified standard deployments to create independent environments that, using infrastructure as a service, will create their own user acceptance environment that people can get their certification without needing to affect the rest of the train. And this almost works. All right, so, but we're never done. There's always going to be things that we need to learn. We can tackle the known unknowns, but there's always going to be the unknown unknowns that are going to arise. So what are we going to do about that? So first important thing is to love the journey that we're on. We're never done. Sometimes we encounter engineers that think at some point we're going to be done, and we're never going to be done. The world is always changing. Business is always changing. Technology is always changing. Change is good. Embrace the change and learn from it. So people are going to change. The market's going to change. Process is going to change. You are going to need to change. So how is Orbitz going to continue changing? So Orbitz, we're going to keep on going faster. I would say we're going fast now. We want to go faster, and by next year we want to go faster. We also are going to go smaller. So right now, our main big web application is going 2 times a week, and we still have fairly large change sets. We want to get down to quickly deploying each change individually to production, and we are going to achieve that by the end of the year, damn it. We also are empowering the rest of our team. So by making these changes small and decoupling them, we are actually empowering the people who have the most authority to say yes about something, to be able to say yes about it, without affecting someone else. So when we're making one change, when someone has said, I want this thing to happen, and we implement just that one thing, and we're going to deploy just that one thing, if anyone along the way says that thing's not ready, we're not affecting anyone else. So we are empowering our product to say, yes, I want that in production. We're empowering our testers to say, yes, that thing works how we think it's going to work, and we're empowering the developers to say, yes, this was implemented how it should have been implemented. All right, so even faster. So what I want you to do is think about fighting for daily releases. If you aren't able to deploy daily right now, that should be your next goal. But don't fight for every single day's release. Every single day's release is not all that important. But being able to deliver and being willing to deliver every single day is very important. I also think we should create DevOps test product, someone stole my slide yesterday, teams. We're just a team implementing a feature, adding business value. There's lots of people who are participating in that, and every person who's participating in that should have a voice in the implementation and deployment of the thing. And this is just tearing down more silos that we've already torn down between development and operations. You should also build rubrics and use them. Remember, there is no pre-production environment. There's only, if you think about it, it's worse to break our pre-production testing environment, because where someone is paying to use your site in production, you are paying someone to use your site in pre-production. You are wasting money if it's broken. Also, we're empowering our testers to do their job and to do it well. We're also allowing the specialists on our team to do their job well. All right, so what's next for you? So go out and make more frequent releases, plan for failure, have only production environments, and as Jesse Robbins, who was the master of disaster at Amazon, and I know some people from Chef here, don't fight stupid, make more awesome. All right. So now I'm going to flip over my badge. So this one says presenter. Do you want to do questions first? That sounds great to me. Any questions?
Yeah, so you mentioned that in your...
Okay, you can, there we go. You'd mentioned when you guys were trying to assess whether or not a bug would get a hot fix versus just go back through and come back in the last release, you would associate a cost with that. You said I think it was like $4,000 or something like that. What was the process you went through to associate a cost with a bug?
Good question. So the cost of doing a deployment or the cost of the bug?
So the cost that you would use to determine whether or not that bug required a hot fix or would wait.
Sure. So the deployment takes some amount of time. While much of it is automated, there's still the mental effort for whoever is making that change to cut a new artifact to be deployed, to do that deployment, for the retesting that has to happen. There's also the impact of invalidating any other testing that had happened, which is always potential. And so looking across that was roughly 40 man-hours on average was what we were talking about. And so using very rough math, saying $100 an hour, that's where we came to $4,000 as the threshold. Then for the other side, for what's the value of fixing this, I put that all on the business, on whoever is asking for the change. And that was very interesting. It helped me learn a lot about how they think about things. Very quickly, I would get revenue. This has this much revenue, which is great. Revenue is great. I like revenue. But I have a condo, if you're looking for a condo, I have a condo in Uptown you'd love to buy. It's way overpriced. Because I get tons of revenue. I get $1,200 a month. I lose money every month on that condo. My revenue, the revenue numbers makes it sound like I should go out and buy unprofitable condos left and right. So I learned about this thing called contribution to margin, which apparently is the really important thing. And so the contribution of margin has to be over $4,000.
So in connection with the same question, so how you were gonna when actually there are security fixes required. So do you wait for a security release, or because they are important, and how do you relate a cost with the security fixes?
Yeah, so everything has a cost. A lot of what
Sorry, and how do you justify to the business, like, also, like, your management team is basically running the show, pushing you to the releases or patches, the hot fixes, right? So how do you relate the security fixes, and how does it fit into the patches process?
Yeah, sure. So everything has a cost. So I'm going to use an analogy to a different kind of change and come back to security. So we've had times where people have wanted to patch something because our brand didn't look right. And people would say, oh, well, this is goodwill. This is customer goodwill. We're not going to be able to put a value, which isn't true. If you actually look at our SEC filings, we put a value on our goodwill. We clearly can say how much it costs for us to screw over customers. So that is something we can put a value on. So we only do security for business reasons. We are the partner with banks that require us to have these things. Those contracts have penalties. There are real reasons. Like sometimes it is obvious this thing has to be patched because it's money. But other times, people want to be real hand-wavy and say, well, this is a legal requirement. Well, it's a legal requirement because we don't want to pay a fine, and we have as a principle that we want to be a good corporate citizen. So we can put a value on that.
So you mentioned having a release for every commit.
Mm-hmm.
That seems insane to me. How do you test that?
So it's a very good question, a very common question. When we make one small change, we can know we can do an impact analysis to know what that change is going to do. But when I make, it's like if you changed one thread in a weaving, you could see exactly where that goes. But when you've changed every thread, how do you test the entire garment? And that's what we are finding now is that it's impossible for us to do impact analysis when we have all these changes going into our application because the only right testing is in full regression testing, which we do not have time to do. So we're doing focused testing on what has actually changed. Very good question. Right. Right. Yeah, we are not doing full regression testing for every single release. That is insane. Yes.
I was hoping that you could go more into that rubric that allows you to pull the release and sort of divorce yourself from emotion when you're chasing a release and pulling the plug on it.
All right. So confessional time. Monday, I was sitting in one of our lunchrooms, and the dev lead for the release came up to me, and he said, our loyalty team has found a bug in our Canary deployment environment. And my first thought, my emotion kicked in and said, oh shit, all right, what do we got to do to fix this? And then he said, and we're going to cancel the release. I said, he has been much more even-keeled about this than I have been. That's the right thing to do. It's practice. And because there still is, the desire that we want to deploy. Like, we've done work, we want it to go into production. That is what we are here to do. But separating out, this isn't going to go on Monday, it's going to go on Wednesday, that's probably okay. It's not easy to separate those things out.
Okay, so we're going to do this and one more question.
So you said you were setting up like autonomous testing environments for each individual team.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include a database? Or if you share a database, and if you share a database, how do you coordinate like one team's data corrupting issue with another team's? Because like other teams are going to get to that data corruption, and they're going to be like,
so that's a good. So right now we do have. They would be sharing a database. We don't have very database intensive, like that kind of corrupting stuff. We're not making those kinds of changes in one database. Multiple teams making one change in a database. Most of our data is coming from third parties, from airlines, from hotels, from car vendors. We do store things in our own database, but we are not making, say, structural changes to that very often that might stop on top of it. That's definitely a concern that you'd have to deal with in that environment. Ideally, I don't like the way our databases work. They're not DevOpsy at all. We should be able to spin up a full instance that has populated with some basic data for each environment. That would be the goal. We're not there yet.
Any more questions? Okay.
All right, so I'm going to flip over my